agendas.
Good morning and welcome to the regular meeting of the Town of Qualicum Beach. And I start by saying that we are holding this on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, in particular Qualicum First Nation. On the agenda, there's been a couple of additions, and you have them in your greet sheets. They're under staff reports, under number 9, and then there's 2C, council meeting schedule, and another one, the Indigenous engagement information, so that would be 4A, and the council meeting schedule would be 2C, under 9. And then there was a request for a letter of support from the farmers market, and it was a late item. It's not critical, but I thought it would be good for us to deal with it if council so wishes. So if council is okay with considering the request for letter of support? Everybody okay with that? Yeah, okay, so that goes under correspondence. Any other changes to the agenda? Then the agenda is adopted by consent. Then we have the consent agenda, which is the correspondence log, and we just pulled one off. So anything else? Thank you. Then the agenda and adoption agenda, consent agenda is all adopted. And the minutes, there were errors and omissions in the February 28th council meeting. Seeing none, then the minutes are approved by consent. Then there's a business arising from the minutes. And who would like to start with that? Ms. Swenson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So on page 14 of your package, you'll see the November 10th Committee of the Whole minutes, and there was an error on the wording. So we're striking 2026 and inserting 2027 on page 4 as noted below on your package.
Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Valk, in favor to amend the minutes? All in favor? Okay, thank you. Carried unanimously. Then there's a notice of motion from Councillor Harrison.
Sorry, yeah. I do see the staff recommendation. I'm just not sure on the rationale why that would be delayed, because it's essentially just a request to the RDN. It's not work that the town would necessarily be doing prior to that, from my understanding. But if I'm wrong, please correct me.
Ms. Swenson? Sorry, Ms. Valera.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I think as new requests are coming forward, I think council and the public will frequently see this comment between now and at least the end of June. And I think what often looks like just a simple request will often end up in staff time through dialogue with other staff or other pieces like that. So it's rare that staff would put forward a request and then subsequent staff time wouldn't be involved. So that is why the recommendation sits as it is, Your Worship.
Right, so the recommendation is to defer this to June 30th. Are you okay with that?
Well, I think one thing is that if we want to make it clear that we couldn't follow up with the RDN until after that, that might be one thing. But the reason I was thinking we might want to do it sooner is because it is a live issue at the RDN board. I think it moved through 1 or 2 readings where they're trying to get a regional zero carbon code advanced. So I just wanted to make sure that prior to that process being completed, then we send a request to include that in the process. That's just why I was just trying to make sure that I do understand if something where if we were to get a report back saying, well, they're asking us to do this work, we're at capacity, we're full up, so we can't get back to them and it's not going to work out, that's fine. But I was just hoping that maybe we could just sort of flag that with them first and understand we have 0 staff time until at least till after June.
I could perhaps be of assistance as your director for the RDN from Qualicum Beach. I could raise the issue.
If council feels that's appropriate, sorry, I just don't want to get ahead of council on this and just say individually.
If that's okay, if council is okay, I can advance this and then come back to them, and as you said, after the 30th of June.
And I'll just send the RDN and staff just sort of an update on the details, because I have done an inordinate amount of research on that one topic, so not asking anyone else to do it. So that way, at least staff are understanding where the request is coming from, and it's not designed to be a nitpicky thing. It's actually based on some facts.
Ms. Varela, is that okay for, as the director from Qualicum Beach, to raise this and then explain the difficulty with the timeline?
I would think it would be appropriate for the director to speak to staff constraints as experienced at the Qualicum, the town of Qualicum Beach, and then if there's information that is to be directed to RDN staff, perhaps that could come through my office so that we're still at some level on a staff to staff. I could reach out to their CAO, and but again, you can see how quickly it becomes more than just sending off a package. But any way I can assist, I will, Your Worship.
Thank you. So if you would send the stuff to our CAO and to me, and then I can perhaps advance it that way. So, Ms. Svensson, for the minutes, it's a slight deviation from what the staff recommended, but after this discussion, can you see how we could word it, that what council decided today would be appropriate?
I think the motion, the staff recommendation could stand as it is, and just add an and further that Mayor Westbrook, as the board director for the town, will provide an update to the Regional District of Nanaimo staff.
With the information provided by Councillor Harrison. Everybody okay with that? So by consent, thank you, Ms. Svensson, that got passed. Thank you. Delegations, Echo Place Theatre, Colin Lloyd and Ian Morton, come on up. And just, yeah, it turns green if you're right. There you go.
I'm an actor, so I don't need a microphone. Good morning, my name is Ian Morton. I am going to be very serious. I am an actor, as you can tell, and the vice president of the board of directors of Echo Players, and this is.
I'm Colin Lloyd. I am the treasurer at Echo Players and also chair of the Take a Seat fundraising campaign. Good morning.
And we are gathered here today to tell you about our 50th anniversary plans. Echo Players has been, as you might guess, 50 years, around since 1974, which counts up to 50 years. The building was built in 1948 and opened in 49 it was a movie house, just a bit of background. So it goes right back into the roots of this community. It opened with a Bob Hope movie called something Bob, Sad Bob or something, a really inauspicious Bob Hope musical. But then Echo Players came in and became the landlord in 1974, and things changed. And now we are kind of, if we're not bragging too much, part of the cultural institution of Qualicum Beach. And so now we are having to develop plans to celebrate, and we're here to ask your support in kind as much as possible for some of these activities coming up. We are hoping to have a gala celebration of the Civic Center, if possible, with perhaps skits from some of our greatest hits, who knows. We would hope that the mayor could come and part the curtain or say hello on our opening night on October the 10th for our first play of our 50th anniversary, a play called Cheshire Cats. It'd be nice to have like a letter of proclamation from the mayor and the council. One of the big asks we realize is that we would really love to hang a banner temporarily from our turret, if you can imagine the turret on our building, with our 50th anniversary logo, and just basically Echo Players celebration, just a banner, a bit of visual, possibly also the banners that are hung from lampstands. That's one of the ideas. And also, any marketing assistance we could ask for from the website, your website designers, to some of the information about Echo players is a little outdated. So we would appreciate any kind of marketing help from that point of view.
Thank you, Ian. So my role is to chair the fundraising campaign, which we have called Take a Seat. Now, in 50 years of our history, we've never actually had new seats. They have been borrowed, they've been mended and made do. And as we think about our next 50th, we'd like to significantly increase people's comfort. The campaign is to raise $140,000, which seems daunting, but we're already off to a good start, having raised 15% of that total, $22,000 in a month on the back of just one email. And so we're asking for our seat sponsors to come forward from our members and our patrons and our season ticket holders. You can sponsor a seat for $500 and have a plaque commemorating yourself or a person on the back of it. We'll be looking to businesses and small and medium businesses for donations, and to institutions and other orders of government for other grants and so on. And Your Worship, very grateful indeed for your assistance in directing us to the Island Economic Trust, and we've already begun a really fruitful conversation with them. In terms of council support, we're looking for your mentorship, which has already begun in terms of grants, and then receiving in-kind donations from council as seems appropriate as we begin construction of our project.
Yeah, so basically, just in conclusion, I have no idea if that's 5 minutes, but we're asking for your support to celebrate what we all believe is a big, rich part of the community of Qualicum Beach. And I don't know if there's a question part of this presentation, but we're more than happy if you have any questions.
Sure. Questions? Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, so firstly, I just want to thank Echo Players for all the work you do. I remember reading through the Quality of Life survey for what sort of entertainment folks want to see more of in town, and theater was one of the highest recommendations. So it does speak to the work you're doing, and the fact that you guys are pretty much booked to capacity, I think. Just as you're looking at putting in new seats, I was just wondering, forgive me my ignorance if this is something you're already on, but just because we're talking about accessibility in the town, has there been any thought of how to make some of the seating arrangements accessible for folks who might be in wheelchairs or walkers?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. And we do have capacity to enable people to be able to access the seating through wheelchairs. We're going to make that bigger and more comfortable. And in terms of walkers, we have a team that accompany people with their walkers to their seat, and then we store the walker and then come and collect them when it's safe to do so as they leave the theatre. So they're well accommodated, and I believe they feel comfortable in that environment.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? I echo what was being said about the importance of our cultural life in Qualicum Beach, and Echo Players is a key part of that. So staff will prepare a report on the things you've asked for, and we'll read that next week, or our next council meeting, sorry. And so we'll work together on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, would you like to hear a song?
Well, I was hoping you did that skit. That skit you did with our planner when they played and everything went wrong. That was fabulous. Ms. Varela, just a moment. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could we have the minutes reflect that at an upcoming council meeting rather than the next council meeting, please?
Okay, at an upcoming council meeting, we'll report back on your requests. Thank you. Then we had a request for a delegation from Elizabeth Cabell-Feisch, West Qualicum Beach, regarding multiple myeloma. Come on up. You have up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Cabell-Feisch, and I've been living in Qualicum Beach with my husband Chris and my two daughters, Samantha was 15 and Fiona was 12, for the past 10 years. We absolutely love living in Qualicum Beach. The community sense is very strong, And we arguably have the best views and beaches and access to nature in the world for sure. So, March is Multiple Myeloma Awareness Month. So I'm grateful to you, Mayor and Council, to letting me come today and speak about it. Before we begin, I just want to fully disclose that today is not my best day in terms of my treatment cycle because of medication I received yesterday. Wednesdays are very challenging. So I will probably rely on my text heavily, and don't be fooled by those rosy cheeks. They are side effects. So I've provided council already in advance with information and reference about multiple myeloma. In the interest of time, I'm going to really focus more on the importance of awareness than going through all the details. For those listening to the live stream, if you wish to get more information about multiple myeloma, there's some great resources on the Myeloma Canada website. I was just 43 years old when I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma 2 years ago. And it was a disease that I've never heard of when I was diagnosed with it. To say that I was scared and overwhelmed is probably an understatement, but thanks to the amazing support of my incredible team of doctors and nurses, my family and friends, I've learned to navigate this challenging disease. I've also learned the importance of putting my well-being first and focusing on staying positive and holding dear moments with my loved ones. This unexpected journey has taught me resilience, helping me face the many twists and turns of this disease with courage and gratitude. What is multiple myeloma? Although it sounds similar, multiple myeloma is not melanoma, melanoma being a form of skin cancer. Multiple myeloma is a type of blood cancer caused by the uncontrolled growth of abnormal plasma cells in the bone marrow. Each year, around 4,000 Canadians are diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is about 11 a day, so pretty much everyone in this room. It's the second most common blood cancer, and there's no cure. The journey with multiple myeloma varies greatly among patients due to factors like symptoms, severity, and different types of myeloma. It's this complexity that makes this disease so uniquely challenging. Responses to treatments and related complications can vary largely, and it leads to different outcomes. It is also important to not overlook the emotional challenges that comes with dealing with this disease. I want people to know that while myeloma has no cure, it is treatable. Research into myeloma is constantly evolving, leading to innovating treatments and a promising horizon. Just in the past few years, multiple myeloma prognosis has really improved with the emergence of new treatments. It is important to know that myeloma can manifest itself with symptoms that are often vague and similar to stress, aging, or more common diseases, so it can go undiagnosed for a very long time. I would recommend seeking medical advice to anyone experiencing symptoms like unusual fatigue, weakness, recurrent infections, easy bruising or bleeding, and bone pain, especially in the back. Now, with a couple years of experience with this disease under my belt, spreading awareness has been really incredibly important to me. I feel deeply connected to my community, and for me, awareness is all about ensuring that people have the tools they need. It's sharing knowledge so that we can recognize the symptom, educate ourselves, and have meaningful conversation with our health team. Early diagnosis is crucial, and by spreading awareness, we empower to take charge of our health. Also, the more people know about myeloma, the more people in communities will be inspired to participate in our fundraising efforts, like our March in Myeloma Walk in September, not to confuse it with March. Fundraising is crucial to funding research for new treatment and eventually finding a cure. Every time I share information about myeloma, I feel a sense of purpose. By sharing information, I'm not just sharing what I've learned through my personal experience, but I am empowering potential future patients and caregivers. Through these conversations, I hope to instill a sense of hope and resilience in anyone touched by this illness. Talk today to someone you know about multiple myeloma and encourage them to do the same. Together, we can raise awareness and make a difference in the lives of those affected, one person at a time. thank you for your time, and I'm open to questions as well.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Any questions to the delegation? Ms. Councillor Skipsey?
Just, I think in the last couple of days, the province announced that there's certain treatments that were going to be available, I think, for leukemia, but I don't know if it would impact this type of cancer.
Definitely. Well, it will down the road. So there's lots of new treatments that are past clinical trial and are in the process of being, and I'm not an expert, I'm not a medical doctor or a researcher, but for what I know, there's things called bispecific T-cell engagers and CAR-T therapy that we're all anxiously waiting for. They are very promising and hopeful for us. And Vancouver has just started a program specifically for lymphoma, which has seen lots of promising results. It's a very complex drug and a very complex treatment that requires a lot of observing and data and things like that. So they're starting with lymphoma, and then eventually we're thinking about 2 years we may have access to CAR-T for myeloma as well. But for me specifically, I'll be on my second relapse right now, and I'll be starting a bispecific T-cell engager, which is very, very exciting, just because it's brand new technology. So we're moving forward for sure. So, and there's lots of funding coming, so that's pretty exciting.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you for coming out today and your courage to present this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Under correspondence, we have a letter for more town pins, and there's a staff recommendation. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Skipsey, discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. And then there's the letter that we agreed to take a look at, and perhaps Councillor Vander, since you brought this up, would you like to highlight some of the reasons why this is a good thing?
Yes, this is, sorry. It's a letter from the BC Farmers Market regarding their nutrition coupon program and outlining the results of having that coupon program in Qualicum Beach specifically, that local residents redeemed $40,446 with local farmers at the Qualicum Beach Farmers Market, and over 104 lower income residents benefited from better access to local fresh foods while connecting with their community. The BC Farmers Market is asking us to send a letter of gratitude and support to the BC Minister of Health, the Honourable Adrian Dix, to pass on the success of the program and to hopefully secure ongoing funding.
Thank you. Any questions about that?
And I just want to actually just say that this is really actually an important program, because the barrier for a lot of folks who are lower income isn't so much access to food, it's access to healthy food. You can buy, as a single guy who doesn't have tons of money, you can go to a grocery store and buy lots of frozen, preservative-laden stuff for dirt cheap, but it's not good for you. So it's great to see this program in place.
So, Councillor Vander, you'd like to make a motion, and if I'm listening to Councillor Harrison, you will second that, to send a letter of support as requested. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Bylaws. Adoption of the financial plan. Mr. Hare.
Thank you, Your Worship. So in your packages, you have the financial plan bylaw, which received third reading at the last council meeting. So it's basically there for adoption. We also, I'll let you deal with that, and then we'll go to the budget book.
Right, so then a motion to adopt the financial plan 2024-2028. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Vander, discussion. Councillor Harrison.
And I just want to thank staff. There's been a ton of work on this. Also, too, I want to give a shout out to council for not having unreasonable last-second requests. Is very helpful. But I know we've received some emails about the tax increase, and I'm sure we'll have some conversations about that just with the general public. I would urge people to compare us to other similar communities in the area. It's not ideal to see the kind of tax increases we're seeing in all these communities, but we're not alone in this. We're not an outlier. So I just want to highlight that I would hope folks take the time to look at some other communities just to make sure we have that context for what we're seeing in the financial plan.
Thank you. And the inflation, as was pointed out and yesterday at the regional district as well, people look at inflation and it's a basket of goods that the typical home would need. But for us, with pipes and concrete and paving and other things, that's a different category, and those costs have gone up far more than average inflation. So thank you for your support, Council, and for the work that was done by Mr. Hare and Janelle Khan. I don't see her today, but she did an awful lot of work. I've seen her go back and forth in your office, so well done. So has it been moved and seconded yet? It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Hare, please proceed.
So the second motion we have there is adoption of the financial plan budget book, which you had reviewed at the February 28th meeting, and we've made a minor revision, which doesn't impact any of the information in the book, but we have an online version of the budget book that Rebecca and I will tag team and walk you through so that members of the public who want to access the electronic version will be able to navigate through it. And we added instructions on the very first page of the book on how to navigate through that.
We need that.
And so if we, without any further ado, maybe we'll just go to our, so you can access the online version of this budget book from our website by going to the finance section. And when you go into the finance section, we'll go to the 2024 financial plan process. And the very top item on the right-hand side, there is a link to our budget book. And it's a flip budget book. So if you go to the first page, we've got instructions here. This is what I just spoke to about how to navigate through the book. So for example, if you wanted to go to the strategic initiative section, we've got links in there. You just click on that and it'll take you to the strategic initiative section, and then you can flip through the pages of that section. And once you're through that section, if you want to go to another section, you can bring up the table of contents, and you can go back to the table of contents and go to any other section you want to go to. This is the online version, and then we also have a PDF, so if anybody wished to download the PDF down to their own computer, it's also got links that navigate you through the document as well. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. Councillor Harrison, do you want to speak to this?
No, the only comment is, wow, that's very impressive. I think it's the most impressive budget document I've seen in my time in council.
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey? I just wanted to move for adoption. And Councillor Vander seconding. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Mr. Hare?
So, Your Worship, the next items on the agenda are reserved bylaws. They received 3 readings in July, and they've come back forward for adoption.
I think we can take number 2 to number 7 at one time. So if Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Harrison, discussion, all in favor, opposed, if any, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hare. Zoning Amendment 630 Hemlock Street. Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. The next item on the agenda is a zoning amendment application for 630 Hemlock Street. This has been considered by council on several previous meetings. It's also been reviewed by the Advisory Planning Commission. Next slide. Next slide. As noted previously, this property is within the village neighborhood, which is the area designated by the official community plan for residential densification in the near and long-term future. Next slide. The proposal is to take a relatively large residential lot and split it into 3 smaller lots, each of which would have a house and potential for a suite. The plan up on the screen before you shows 3 potential configurations of the suite, either attached or detached from the primary dwelling. Next slide. We have a few perspective renderings both from the front and rear of the property. Next slide. Just a quick summary, which we've gone over a few times, but in relation to the impact of Bill 44 and the housing regulation on this particular zoning amendment process. So the first important point is that the town is not permitted to hold a public hearing for this proposal, as it does comply with the official community plan. And secondly, a few points about what would be possible without the zoning amendment, or what it would look like if Bill 44 wasn't here. So on the second point, the zoning as it sits today does not allow subdivision into multiple parcels. The minimum parcel size is too large. Bill 44 doesn't impact that. And so in other words, the proposal before you today wouldn't necessarily be directly impacted by Bill 44. With or without Bill 44, the applicant would be here before you today because they're proposing to subdivide. The third point here is that the specific R21 zone, which is separate from the subdivision regulation, it just has reduced setbacks. So that zone likely will not be necessary after the adoption of the Bill 44 regulation, because Bill 44 recommends a much lower set of setbacks. So at the time that goes through as a housekeeping item, we would simply delete the R21 zone. So with that, I would just state that the recommendation is to give it third reading at this time. And there is a form and character covenant being registered that will also limit the density of those 3 lots in the future. So when Bill 44 goes through, council or the public would not be surprised to see suddenly 12 dwelling units on these 3 lots. So the Bill 44 regulations wouldn't apply because it would be limited by the covenant. With that, the recommendation is third reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Skipsey?
Okay, so we're not allowed to have a public hearing, but we have received a couple of items of correspondence related to this rezoning. So I'm wondering, I guess it's okay for us to ask those questions. There was concern about laneways and how these would be used. There was maybe an assumption that it would be opened up and used for recycling and garbage truck collection through the laneway. Couldn't staff speak to that, whether that's in the plans or not?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think in relation to that, apparently the garbage trucks, solid waste trucks, they go along on Hemlock. And so if they have to go around the back, would that not be easier if everybody puts the bins out on Hemlock?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Skipsey, and also in response to your question, the garbage trucks are generally too large to maneuver on the lane widths that we have within the town. So most people take their garbage and recycling and compost out to the street, and that would be the case in the future. The laneways were sized to accommodate vehicles and perhaps the utility trucks that existed back many years ago, but those vehicles are extremely large now. They're basically the size of fire trucks, and they can't make those maneuvers. So the garbage would be in this particular location from the primary streets.
Thank you. That was one of the letters that we got. And I looked at that and I thought that was going to be a tight squeeze to put that size of truck to there. Councillor Skipsey.
Okay. Well, I just had a couple of things, and I had asked this question of staff previously so they know what's coming. But when there's a zoning amendment like this, I find it would be helpful for myself, anyways, to have all of the information and I know council maybe not have the authority to make decisions on some of these things, but things like a rainwater management plan, just knowing that all of the water is going to be dealt with on site, I would feel better knowing that ahead of time. And then a tree and vegetation management conservation plan, seeing that ahead of time, where where the trees might go, and in a case like this where there's really limited space within the property, are we looking at street trees? Is that a conversation that we should be having? Because if there isn't going to be space on private property to be planting trees, then I think as a council, we should be having the conversation about boulevard trees or where the trees are going to go. And also the laneway planning, whether or not, the plan is to open up the laneway, whether there will still remain some trees and it won't be a through lane. I think like having information like that ahead of time, rather than in the report saying it would be done at a later time, I think it would be helpful for me personally when voting on these matters.
Thank you. Any comment from Mr. Sales?
Yes, through the chair, Councillor Skipsey. Given that you've stated your preference to not hearing that it's going to be dealt with later, I'm a little bit reluctant to say that it will be dealt with later. So that this is a zoning amendment, but there's a subdivision process that will follow, and it's during that subdivision process that the planning department and engineering department would work to make sure that the water is infiltrated on site and doesn't generate rapid runoff and can be infiltrated, which is, of course, the town's long-term goal and the general standard, especially in this area where we have a relatively underdeveloped storm network system. So that is the case. So that it will be dealt with either on site or perhaps through some provisions in the frontage area. So in regard to street trees, this particular location is not a part of town that has a regular street tree program. So in other words, if this development were happening in the uptown area, of course, there would be a regular street tree placement as a requirement. This neighborhood does not have that same standard. So, we'll work with the applicants to beautify the boulevard as much as possible. But it's not a standard requirement. For example, every 8 meters or 10 meters, you need to have a tree. But I would also note that through the Bill 44 work that's currently underway, we are exploring those type of boulevard standards that we could employ in the future. So in principle, I absolutely agree with your statement that we really should be looking at boulevards in these types of infill developments, and that's one of the primary topics of the design guideline work that's underway through Bill 44, is to make sure that when these lots are more fully developed with large parcel coverage, minimal space on site for trees, that there is an investment in the boulevard in front of these developments. So with this particular development, it'll be a case by case kind of discussion, negotiation with the developer. But at a broader policy level, we are doing that work, and council will see that in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thanks. That's actually very helpful. Just to follow up sort of on what Councillor Skipsey was saying, we also received in that letter some concern about the tree removal on their laneways, and I do understand that our OCP's sort of looping into this whole idea of having a little bit more pedestrian-friendly roads. We have vehicular access through the laneways, so that is hardwired in our OCP for the village neighborhood area. But I'm just wondering, for the tree loss, do we sort of keep track of the trees that would be lost, say, in the laneway, and then try to replant an equal number of trees somewhere else? Is that something we're currently doing right now?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Harrison, the town does not have a policy requiring the replacement of trees in the laneway, but I think this came up at a previous meeting. Wherever trees can be retained, we do require that construction retain those trees, and sometimes that means slightly rerouting the laneway, because it's typically not the entire width. So if we can retain some of those trees in the laneway, we would be doing so, but the town does not have a specific replacement policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. And beyond that too, it would be ideal if we had a little bit more idea of how the street-facing side of the beautification work would happen later, but this is exactly in line with what our OCP already said. Forgive me, when the mayor wanted to change the urban containment boundary, this would still be within that area. And it's, I think, in line with the density requirements in our OCP. So I look forward to hearing more about what we're going to be doing on those sort of main streets as we transition away from the streets being where you have all your garages to the laneways. But that's obviously, staff are so busy. I'm not going to, like, I was thinking, oh, maybe we should get a policy about planting more trees. No, staff are crazy busy. I'm not going to propose anything right now. But I do think that maybe in 4 or 5 months, we might want to talk about where we have to remove trees through laneways. We just keep track of how many. And then every year we sort of have, we took out 15 trees this year. We've planted 15 trees somewhere else. And just so the citizens who are concerned about tree loss know it's not perfect, but it is a kind of a balance.
Thank you. Councillor Vander, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I still have concerns about subdividing properties into smaller and smaller lots and building essentially single-family homes on them. And I still think that we should wait until June 30th when the required zoning changes for Bill 44 have been made. And hopefully through Bill 44, the town can introduce a variety of building types at a variety of prices, some of which are more affordable. And the project is, as I said previously, for the most part, a well-considered design. And yes, it does provide housing, but it's the same kind of housing that we already have in the town at very expensive prices. So I will not be opposing this application, but I do hope in the future that the town looks more seriously at alternative solutions.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Oh, and just for the benefit of council too, at the housing conference, was it 3 weeks ago now? 4 weeks ago? My apologies if I'm a bit fuzzy. I did specifically ask in one of the sessions about the federal and provincial programs to have pre-generated home designs, how granular those designs would be, how much leeway there would be for sort of the character of our community as opposed to a generic Vancouver special being plopped in. So I don't know if there's any feedback, but there were provincial staffers there, so hopefully they were listening. We should be hearing from the province in the summer what the outcomes of the provincial process is for that. I don't know about the federal process. They put out an RFP in January. It's supposed to be complete in July. But where the province is going is there will be pre-approved designs throughout all of BC. And so to Councillor Vandervalk's point, in theory, that reduces your design costs. But it's also, too, I think, important for our community to make sure that we have a little bit of say in how they look. So it's not all the finishes pre-approved from the province, from Victoria, and then is ported in wholesale into Qualicum Beach. But we do have a fundamental problem ultimately of construction costs. I think for single-family homes, you're looking at probably minimum $350 a square foot. So 1,000 square feet is $350,000 without any land. So it's very hard to get that genuinely affordable price point without subsidies. So just want to flag that.
Thank you. It's been recommended for third reading. Going to have a motion to that effect. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Skipsey. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. And before adoption, Mr. Sales, you heard about the trees, and Qualicum Beach takes a lot of pride in the character of these neighborhoods. And from my own experience, it's a wonderful thing to have. When it gets hot, to have some shade. And this morning, I started hearing lots of bird life. It's a good thing. It's not like we're trying to punish people saying you have to have trees. It's a good thing for the environment. It's a good thing for cooling off, parking car underneath it, and so on. So how do you think that would go if you went to the developer and said, we really would like to, even though we don't have you can't make you, but we don't have a policy, but can we put something in that it says boulevard trees, although not required this time, would be appreciated? How would you do that?
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. I would note that the plans do show boulevard trees in front on the public lands. So my understanding is that there is an intention to do that, but I will reach out to the applicant and try to get a little more clarity about exactly what, how that'll be configured. So, yeah, if you're looking at the renderings, just note that there are trees in the front, and I will report back with some more details at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And another project the same people are involved in, they look very attractive, and they do have a lot of green, so appreciate that. So for adoption, Councillor Harrison? Pardon? We can do adoption today, can we not? Mr. Field?
The covenant is still being registered. Council could, in theory, do adoption, but it's more standard practice to wait for the covenant to be registered. Thank you.
We'll wait for the covenant to be put in place. Reports. I think it's a good thing, but it's going to be a long road to follow, and that is the referendum for the addition to the Ravensong pool. The board did not agree to plan for another pool, a recently pool in Parksville, but they're now considering getting a cost estimates and a referendum on the subject. The cost will be significant, but a lot less than a new pool. So that's my main thing. And basically our taxes, because they went to the financial plan as well, the taxes that they will impose on Qualicum Beach will be in the 5% range, I believe, increase. So it's reasonable. For some other areas, as you mentioned earlier, they're in the double-digit numbers, and they're not happy. But I looked at some of them yesterday, and I don't want to go on too long, but just so you have an indication, in certain areas around us, the average tax for next year will be less than $100 a month. You can hardly fill up your tank of gas for $100 a month. You can't even get a hotel room anymore for $100 a month. They're getting lots of services, police and fire protection, parks and recreation, all kinds of other things that come with that. And it's less than $100 a month. So there was a delegation yesterday, you can view it, very experienced and very qualified accountants. But my question is, you know, when you look at that and you compare it to your IT connections, whether it's with Tellers or Shaw and all that, I think in our house, and we're pretty low bar as far as what we need, we're, I think, just about double that. So I think you have to put it in perspective that what people are getting is very reasonable for comparison with other services that we need. And I think the board has done, and continues to do, exactly what staff is doing, what the board is saying we need done. They have a strategic plan like us. They have other issues they're dealing with. There's going to be a huge cost change when they start planning for a new patient tower in Nanaimo. We want all these things, and I think in most cases we need these things, but there are consequences when you have to come to pay for it. So that's all I'm going to say at this time. Mr. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Worship. So I just want to highlight too on the pool thing. Obviously, we don't know what the future costs will be, but I do recall when we were first debating this, 5 years ago almost, I had a conversation with the woman who was the lead architect on the project. She was hosting the information session at the Civic Center. And she gave me a ballpark price of between 20 and 30 million for the upgrades. There were different configurations, so in that ballpark. But to build everything from scratch, she said would be about 55 million. And you look at a lot of projects during the pandemic, those costs for like fire halls and other larger, more complicated buildings have doubled. So you double those those costs. So whatever we land, if those ratios are the same, we've probably saved $50 to $60 million. So just to flag how big that decision is. Now, it would have been lovely if the previous board had advanced the original plan, but I think there's also a lesson about throwing total curveballs in absurdly level of detail plans that staff have prepared. It's the School District 69 Recreation Master Plan. There was 2 years of consultation that went into it. So the only real meeting in the last little while, because it's been very recently that we had our previous meeting, was the task force on homelessness. One of the reasons that, so council made a motion about a letter to VIHA. One of the reasons I haven't quite put that forward for staff is I'm trying to talk to folks at VIHA about what they want to do. Because if we make a request for something they already want to do, then that probably has a better chance of being successful. I also mentioned the land to the VIHA representative who was unaware of that land. So I sent out an email to the whole task force on a couple other things, but one of the things is our exact zoning map on our website for GIS. And here's Eagle Park, here's the whole property line. And if you look, essentially, it looks like on the south side, but it's probably the west side on the compass. You have basically half the property is undeveloped. So that's something she was not aware of. So hopefully I'll be able to talk to the VIHA representative who sits on the task force and figure out what VHA wants to do in the area, cross off the things that are obviously not in our interest, and then hopefully we can get that letter out relatively quickly. Beyond that, there was one thing I think that should be public is the task force did help with some of the costs at Rise Bridge when they did the emergency warming shelter couldn't cover under the EMR funding. So because there was a bit of a gap, because they had to close up at 6:30, they drive a lot of people to McDonald's and have to buy meals. I think they spent $3,000 at the McDonald's branch in Parksville. So there was a lot of money out of pocket for the nonprofit. The task force doesn't have a huge amount of funds, but they did have enough funds for the 4,200. And we did sort of talk about, they don't have the capacities obviously our municipality does, but having on their website sort of key decision points like that are public, so that you don't have to rely on me saying it in a meeting. It's something that any citizen could go online, look at their website and figure out some of the key points that's been happening. But there's just a staffing, they basically have one person, so they don't quite have the capacity we do. Beyond that, I don't think there's anything to report, so I'll end there.
Just as you mentioned, they weren't aware, Island Health and other health authorities may not be aware of the land. Also, that the building that's on there, Eco Park, is designed to be mirrored. All the mechanical is there, all the services are there, the parking is there. So that would be the easiest thing to do. If they wanted to provide more services, that would be the place to do it. One thing that I thought I'd mention, on the 21st of this month, there's going to be a special celebration of all the work that a fellow in our community, Patrick Weber, has done. He was key in helping with grant writing for Kiwanis Housing. He was a real driving force in the senior center, activity center, worked with the foundation. I think he was the chair of the Parks for Qualicum Beach Foundation, and also with the Rotary Club. It was a big push in there. So on the 21st, on his birthday, you're invited to come here at 11 o'clock to have a special recognition for the work that Pat Weber has done over the years. Thank you. Councillor Skipsey. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the place for it, but when Councillor Harrison mentioned that he was going to be talking to VHA about what they wanted at the meeting where we discussed this before, I think it's really important that council have input into what we want, and that was my understanding, was the letter was going to be sent reflecting what we want. So I'm just trying to make sure that nothing is said before council has had a chance to discuss it.
Yeah, the intent is just to get feedback from them. Just one of the things that was said at that meeting was long-term care. And the province recently announced over $250 million investment in long-term care in Campbell River, Lanceville, and I believe in Duncan was the third location. So the Lanceville one is over 300 beds for long-term care. So it's also on the provincial website says for the Nanaimo region, which I'm assuming is going to include us. So I think some of the things that we'd like to see, the province has basically already invested in other communities, so we might not be able to get that. So I just wanted to double check what's on VHA's radar. Then you come back, don't say, we're absolutely going to do that, but just say, thank you for letting us know what you want to do. You come back, you have a draft letter, goes to all of council, and then council can weigh in, and then we send the final letter. That's the intent. Hopefully that addresses the concern, because I do understand where you're coming from, that you don't want me promising something, and then council says, actually, no, that's not what we want to do. So that is a fair question to ask.
And it is zoned for healthcare type services only. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. Okay, before I move the staff recommendation related to the Heritage Forest management plan, then I would like to just make a couple comments, and then I have a question. So I do know that those involved with the Heritage Forest have been very proactive when it comes to wildfire mitigation, and they developed management plan amendments that were introduced and adopted by the Commission back in November 2021. And then since then, they have been working, undertaking the work in the prescriptions for the 30-meter zone adjacent to Palm Drive. And, there's some people that say there's probably a greater risk of a fire starting in one of the homes and spreading to the forest rather than the other way around. But the experience on the ground and the consultation with our fire chief, as well as information related to the raptor mating season, has resulted in the small amendments, and that's what they are currently asking to have amended. I guess just my question is, it's my understanding that whatever staff come up with, the consultant and staff come up with, as far as they're asking to develop draft fuel management prescriptions, these would need to be also approved by the two other parties, and I just wanted to get clarification on that.
Thank you. Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. Through the chair to Councillor Skipsey, you are correct that because there's a tripartite agreement in place, the other two parties being the Brown Property Preservation Society and the Land Conservancy would have to accept that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and move the staff recommendation then.
Councillor Harrison seconding. Discussion. Councillor Harrison.
Just to echo what Councillor Skipsey said, for the love of the dear Lord, if you live adjacent to a forest, please don't use tiger torches. Please, please, please. I'm just seeing our fire chief. Yeah, it's something that is probably the main cause of fires is people trying to use those tiger torches on their driveways, and then it spreads. So please don't.
Did you just have a little prayer time? Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded, the staff recommendation. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. And you have another one.
And my next notice of motion, should it pass, then there will be students and their teachers from Ballina Secondary School, Qualicum Secondary School, and Qualicum Beach Elementary School there to plant approximately 540 trees, which are all being donated by our MLA, Adam Walker. And it's my understanding that permitting is not required or applicable when planting in riparian areas. So if you're removing or cutting, then yes, you would need a permit, but to actually enhance the area, you don't need a permit. And that was the information that was provided to me. But I would like to move the recommendation for the tree planting on April 22nd.
Seconding Councillor Vander. Mr. Sales, is there an issue planting trees in this area?
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. That is correct that planting trees does not require the same environmental permits that removal would. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. Councillor Harrison.
Do we know the species of those trees by any chance? Just because I remember Councillor Walker used to have a bunch of Gary Oaks, and I'm not sure if Gary Oaks are protected. But if they're not Gary Oaks, then, or like a protected species, it shouldn't be an issue. But
I think there's a variety of, and we have, well, it's Tom Whitfield, who's a retired forester, who is overseeing that. So I think he has a pretty good grasp of what might do well there.
And just if I may, the only other question I'd have is that I don't have a problem to this on its own. The only thing I'm thinking, though, is that we also were hoping to do, I think around in September, I think there's a World Tree Day, and so we're going to do like a tree planting ceremony potentially this year for that. So I'm just wondering, should we pick and choose which of the one, or I'm just wondering like how many of these sort of events are we going to be doing? Is it going to be like twice a year or once a year? Just sort of thinking about that, like should we be planning ahead to next year, or should we be doing this on its own?
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey. This is a totally different project, so I think we can deal with them as they come up. I think if you have that kind of support from the schools and others, and our MLAs providing the saplings, I think we should proceed with that and take another look at whether we want to have an Earth Day tree planting every year or just this year, which we agree to. So on the motion, that was moved and seconded. All in favor? Sorry, go ahead.
Just one question, and is just through the chair to Ms. Varela, just because I know it's April and it's a very busy time of year. Is there any like sort of staff implications? I'm assuming not, but just flagging before we have the vote.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we will be discussing this with staff afterwards. I'm a little fuzzy if staff has been involved at this point because some of the discussions were offline. So I just wanted to clarify with staff after this. We'll take council's direction and make it happen.
Okay. Further discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Vander. Yes.
I just had a couple of things to say under my report, just mentioning that the plans are well underway for the Brant Wildlife Festival, which will be taking place April 5th to 8th. You can check out their website for information on all of the events. There are some tours through the Heritage Forest and many, many other activities. The French Creek Estuary, lots of things are planned, so I would encourage people to look that up. And also, I just wanted to mention that we received a response from the province with regard to our resolution on Scotch broom from UBCM last year. And I'll just read a couple of sentences. The Ministry of Forest is the one that responded. The risks posed by invasive plant species, including Scotch broom, are well recognized by the province. The high flammability of Scotch broom has been identified by ministry invasive plant specialists as a significant threat requiring action during implementation of wildfire risk reduction programs, especially in urban interface areas. These specialists are working with the BC Wildfire Service and the Wildfire Risk Reduction, prescribed fire and cultural burning programs to elevate this risk and support incorporating appropriate Scotch broom control efforts into these programs. And the Ministry of Forest welcomes additional discussion with UBCM on this issue as it relates to reducing wildfire urban interface risk. So I have been in touch with Joanne Sales, who is the head of Broombusters, and we are hoping to meet with the president of the UBCM early April to discuss this further.
Thank you, and she's quite handy.
Yes.
Councillor Vander.
Well, I have already handed in my report, so I have nothing more to report because the ones that happened after that report are going to be on the next report. So the one that will be a little more involved is Councillor Harrison and I did the public open house on Monday, and there were 17 people there at one time. So that I will discuss what topics came up in my next report for our next council meeting.
Thank you. You're
Thank
very
you.
good at that. You give the stuff in advance to Mrs. Swenson, and I think we can all take a lesson from how well organized you are, and we all know what you're doing. And and it looks like you're very busy. So I appreciate all the work you do. Councillor Harrison.
Oh, and just to add too, I did send basically a summary of some of the questions we heard to Ms. Varela yesterday, but obviously yesterday in the afternoon there's no turnaround time, and rather than just say things were heard, I'd really love it if, it'll be a couple weeks, I understand, but when we present on that, to have some of the answers to some of the questions, not just we heard things and that's great, but if there's no follow-up, it doesn't help people as much. So just flagging that, we're both trying to work on that, but I do appreciate how Councillor Vander is more organized than I am.
You look like a wonderful team. Okay, Councillor Young is away. Staff reports. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. I apologize this isn't in a memo format, but I think this will get the job done. So because we're shifting to quarterly reporting, I thought it would be beneficial for both council and the public to be clear on the benchmarks that staff are aiming for. So we would see that robust quarterly financial reporting provided in July and November, because you're just coming out of your budget process now and all of those pieces. So we'll be looking for continued quarterly reporting for that financial piece in July and November. Updates on the airport, fire rescue, and building bylaw portfolios will be provided quarterly, and we'll be looking to April, July, and November for those. We will provide that breakdown monthly, but we'll just be providing it to council and the public quarterly. So again, that will streamline the process a bit for staff and make it less administratively onerous. And then we'd also like to note that additional updates as milestones are met or capacity allows can also be provided. So for example, I know the Infrastructure Services Department has worked diligently there to bring an update on the capital projects forward, and we'll be bringing that forward in April. So in addition to the minimums that I've outlined here, we're also going to try to up our game with providing council and the community with that ongoing reporting as time permits. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any questions to our staff? Next is the, oh, sorry. It's only a comment. It's not really, there's no recommendation there, but we got the drift. Corporate admin, Ms. Svensson.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. So Quality Foods Festival Lights has not been in place since 2019 due to COVID, and they have put an application forward this year to hold the Festival Lights out in the waterfront on Sunday, May 26, which is also Family Day that Qualicum Beach will be hosting. And so there's a staff report before you, and I can take any questions.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Harrison and Councillor Vander.
Yeah, so I do actually support this because this is something that has been a part of the community for the longest time. But some concerns were raised about the noise of fireworks, and I don't think we have enough time this year to change what's proposed. But I was just thinking that as this is something I do think that we want to keep in our community, we might want to have conversations looking forward to next year as to if there's ways we could reduce some of the impacts of the noise. That was just a concern we heard a little bit at open house from one or two people about some of the concerns about that.
Councillor Vander.
Yes, I did also have some concerns about the application, mostly around environmental impacts. And I'm just wondering on page 68 of the agenda under the recommendations, it is noted that a noise control permit and a special permit for exploding fireworks will need to be finalized. And I'm wondering, do those permits provide any assurance about, well, noise control? And I'm assuming that the timing for the fireworks isn't in conflict with any wildlife conservation protection measures. So I'm just like, essentially I'm asking what is comes under the control in those permits.
Ms. Svensson?
Through the chair, Mr. Sales is going to answer for the bylaw department.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. Through the chair to Councillor Vander. The important point here is that the barge is located outside of the town's jurisdiction, so there is a reference to permits, but what happens outside, just because the sound conveys to the town, it wouldn't require permits. And so similarly, like they would require permits from the province potentially, and potentially, you know, fisheries if there's some impact there, but it's outside of the town's jurisdiction. That's the important part.
So just to follow up, if it's outside our jurisdiction, why would they come to us for approval?
It does involve staffing, and the participants will be on town property. So nobody will be likely on the water other than the odd boat that wants to watch, but they need permission to hold the actual event is taking place in town boundaries. The fireworks themselves are on the waterfront, but it'll involve our streets. Everybody will be parking on the waterfront, parking on Memorial. So they need permission for that.
But just to go a little deeper, if they decided to go and do it, it's like there's going to be fishing happening out there. We don't have a say over it. They're going to be right on the beaches. I've done it. They're right on the beach for fishing herring. We don't give approval, so why would they come to us for approval if they're out in the ocean, away from the beach?
Thank you, and thank you to Ms. Svensson for clarifying that, because I was also wondering in my head, why are we approving this? But I think the important point is it does involve staff resources, because it is Family Day. Family Day is a town event. We do provide, things like traffic control and support from the management of things that do happen in our jurisdiction. But the question regarding the environmental permits and noise and such, that's outside of our jurisdiction. So when we talk about approving this as an event, it's really in relation to town resources and the authorization of the, observation and crowd management type of work that does need to happen within the town's jurisdiction.
So, and I've been to a couple of times, and there's a lot of staff there. What would be the rough cost estimate for staff time? Ms. Svensson, do you have a number on that?
Yes, thank you. So in 2019 was when we made a change to this, where we do not require town staff to do the traffic control. So part of the contract, or part of the approval that council's making if they proceed with this, is to have Quality Foods look after all their own contracted services for traffic control. So it would be less than $1,000. We would likely have one staff person that's already regularly scheduled on in the evening to stay on, and then we would add one additional staff member on overtime. But we won't be doing any traffic control. It'll just be overseeing the event for garbage, and special event signage would be put out, just saying event in progress, and just to be available if anything were to be needed to be dealt with on the day.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Councillor Vander and Councillor Skipsey. No, I think you're on the list still.
I'm still on the list.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the old list.
Well, I just want to echo some of the concerns about noise and the environment. When you look up, fireworks and some of the impacts, everything from releasing contaminants into the air, including carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen, sulfur dioxide, and particulate matter. There's issues with, there can be issues with microplastics. In one community, when there were fireworks, it was 1,000% increase in the body of water that they found 6 hours after the fireworks. There's also a chemical perchlorate that is used to help with the upward propulsion, and if it remains in the environment for long periods of time and is easily absorbed, and when it ends up in water bodies, it can also affect fish development. And this is right at the mouth of Beach Creek. So there's many Canadian cities now that have now moved away from fireworks and replaced them with special effects, pyrotechnic displays. I've seen, maybe we're a little ahead of our time yet with drones, but it's quite amazing what can be done. So I struggle, because knowing how the environmental impacts and also the PTSD for people, and then the opportunity cost for the money, what else could the money have been used for? So, but if we actually don't have any say in this, then I guess I'm voting to approve the staffing requirements, but I think it would be nice to look at this in future.
Thank you, Councillor Skipsey. Councillor Harrison. Councillor Harrison.
And I do know from sort of reading about some of the decisions in Parksville, because the Chamber used to do one of their fireworks festivals, and now that's no longer ongoing because of the cost, is my understanding. But they did talk about the drone in particular, because I've seen videos and they're spectacular, they're amazing. Honestly, they're arguably better than fireworks. One of the issues, though, is it's very, very expensive. And the other issue might be that it might be weather dependent. So small electronic drones, I don't know how durable they are. I don't have a drone, so I don't know. But I do think that this is something where I think we want to reinstate this, because this is a beloved thing. The other thing I'd highlight too is that, as someone who's a night owl, on Halloween and some other nights, my fear would be, if we don't approve this, there'd be about 6 or 7 different families who say, well, we'll do our own then. And then they'll do it in their backyard, which is a lot closer to wildlife than out on the beach. So I do think, since we're basically just sort of approving the staffing and making sure the traffic is also an impact that is sort of public about that. I do think this is a good idea. I do share, though, the sentiment that we should probably talk to them moving forward for next year, so they have lots of time to plan for, is there a less impactful way to do something very similar? I think that's a great conversation. Yeah, so I still think this is something we should do this year, but we should be open to spending some time with the folks at QF for those conversations moving forward.
Thank you. Councillor Vander.
Yeah, one of the items that came up at the open house was concern about the amount of money and time and effort that's being spent on 15 minutes or so of essentially entertainment, and that the money might well be better spent, but it's not really the town spending the money, it's a private business spending the money. So I think that in agreement with Councillor Skipsey and Councillor Harrison, I think perhaps for future events like this, we could look a bit more closely at how it's done and the environmental concerns. But I would be in favor of having it this year. I would like to require or ask that and I believe it's a matter of course, but that the town be acknowledged as sponsoring or supporting this event, that it's not strictly a quality foods event.
Well, we may not want to, but all the negative outfall that comes
Well,
from it.
there we go. That may be true.
I'm kidding. But so I think there is some recommendations, if Council would like to make those as a motion. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Skipsey, discussion, all in favor? Opposed, carried. Could I have a follow-up motion, what we were talking about, and basically requesting that we meet with the proponents or the applicants to look at perhaps a more environmentally friendly way to do this. I talked here about light shows and so on. So, Ms. Svensson, I think Council would be in agreement if we ask you to send a letter saying we approve it this year, but we are concerned about some of the environmental impacts and other things. Would it be possible to discuss something we could do for future years that may be less of an impact? Burst of effect, okay, with consent? That's passed with consent, thank you. Triathlon.
Thank you. So similar to the previous one, this is an ongoing event that's taken place for many years in Qualicum Beach, and the Qualicum Beach Triathlon is requesting to hold it on Sunday, June 23rd, and this does involve more staff time, but as I say, we've done it for many years, and it's a good community event.
From Parks and Recreation, Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Harrison, discussion. All in favor? Sorry. Yeah,
I just want to also thank staff for all these special events that we're getting out in front of it and having these discussions. There was one event last year where there's sort of like a lesson learned, I think, of not having those conversations before, and then this is a much better way of doing it. So I just want to give that little hat tip.
Carried unanimously, thank you. And then we have 2C, and that's the council meeting. It's in the green sheets. So at 2C, there's 3 recommendations. We can take them one at a time if you like. Moving all 3, thank you. Councillor Harrison seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried, thank you. And then the fire services. Our fire chief, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Worship. Before you is a request to renew our automatic response agreement dated 2023 to 2028. The agreement was first developed in 2008 between Coombs, Hilliers, Parksville, Arrington, and Qualicum Fire Departments to do with the building of larger buildings, the gardens, the beach club in Parksville. It was required to meet the necessary number of firefighters and apparatus for these large facilities. Since 2028, the automatic response agreement has been renewed twice, with each time adding new partners and additional buildings to it. In 2023, Qualicum Beach responded to or was the recipient of 9 automatic response agreements. We've actually attended 2 structure fires in the last couple of weeks, one in Qualicum and one out, that has required automatic response. This automatic response agreement also made the accreditation to Superior Tendril Shuttle rating in 2021 possible without the addition of any other capital costs. Additions to this agreement include the addition of Deep Bay Improvement District, language changes to allow special rescue and hazmat to be permitted, and clarification of response resources and procedures. There's no financial implications to the signing of this agreement, as all emergency incidents are operational and included in our annual budget at this current time. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Councillor Harrison.
I just move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Vander. This, when you go that far, you're on. Okay, further discussion. Thank you, Chief Cannell. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And then the other item that we approved, and that was regarding the Indigenous engagement for emergency management. And I would invite our fire chief and Mr. Sales to speak to those. Which goes first? Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. I'll be speaking to this one. So the Emergency Disaster Management Act, lovingly known as EDMA, received a royal assent in November of last year. This act requires several new requirements for emergency planning, including an immediate change that requires local governments to incorporate Indigenous knowledge and cultural safety in emergency management planning, and to consult and cooperate with First Nations through response and recovery. The town of Qualicum Beach, as well as the city of Parksville and Regional District of Nanaimo, have received an offer to access a one-time grant of $40,000 each to facilitate these legislated requirements to engage with First Nations on emergency management planning. Staff are seeking confirmation that Council wishes to accept the funding, and if so, then a follow-up report would be presented to Council at a future meeting with some options on how that funding is expended. So if there are any questions, I'd be pleased to take them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chief Cannell, any comments you want to add to that? Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Harrison, Councillor Skipsey.
Well, I was just going to highlight too that this is actually, I know it seems like an extra requirement, but when we talk about vulnerable populations in Oceanside in particular, I'm always struck by the fact that Indigenous population is about 3% of Qualicum Beach's population. That's around 30% of the homeless population in the last point in time count. So having this understanding too for how we respond to vulnerable folks in a way that doesn't create more problems, it's not bad, and I'm grateful to the fact that it's a grant, so it's not coming out of the town's coffers.
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey?
Thank you. Well, I just have a couple of questions. One, has there been any conversations with the Qualicum First Nation? And two, or maybe it's too early for that, I'm not sure. But secondly, I was unsure about whether it really should be a regional approach versus an individual approach, given that we would probably be dealing with different First Nations than, say, Nanoose or the RDN and whatnot. So I just wondered if there's any thoughts about that, about whether we should be, I know that was suggested to be on a regional, but I'm just not sure if that is actually beneficial in this circumstance.
Sure. Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook, and through the chair to Councillor Skipsey. So as noted in the report, the town staff as well as RDN staff and the City of Parksville staff are hard pressed to complete some of the projects underway within the timeline that's set out by the province. So this grant funding has to be expended within a set period of time. So there may be an opportunity to, at a regional level, hire some education and coordinate like at a larger scale with the local First Nations. So there is definitely a clear benefit, both in terms of staffing and the effectiveness to engage at the larger level. However, that's not to say that staff would recommend expending all of this funding at a regional level. We will be looking at opportunities to work more directly with First Nations if there's a way to do that efficiently and effectively within the timeline that's set out. Thank you.
Thank you. I think actually that this is a meaningful way to actually, when you talk about consultation and working with them, we not only have the mandate and the financial support, to make this a meaningful conversation, because I've often found that the folks who've been here the longest know more, the most, and have experience that we don't have. So to actually learn from them and make it part of the official protocol, I think is a very good step in the right direction. Councillor Harrison?
I'm just going to move the 2 staff recommendations.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Vander. Discussion? Councillor Harrison?
Just one more thing too, just as we're doing this, just through the chair to staff, I'm sure staff already know this, but I remember it took me a few years to figure out that the northern part of town is actually shared territory with the Comox Nation as well. So we talk a lot about Stanawas and Qualicum nations, but I just want to make sure we get all 3 where we have shared territory.
Yeah, and to complicate it even more, there's also West Coast First Nations that say, we used to come here and hunt and fish, so I think there's about 7 actually that make some kind of a claim. They're overlapping claims, but they take some interest in this. And I think in this case with fires is one of the worst scenarios that can happen in our area. I'm more concerned about that than almost any other emergency, because it happens so fast and it's decimated communities that we know of. We're very fortunate that we haven't had that problem here so much, but we saw what could happen at Cameron Lake, and these fires move fast. So working with all these areas, I don't want to eliminate anybody from saying, well, you're not part of this. This instead of making it smaller, make it bigger, and stay in touch and warn each other of what's going on, and enforce rules like camping and campfires and so on. So I think this is a good step in the right direction. It's been discussed. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And I believe that is all we have on the agenda. For councillors, there is a document for you to sign, the certificate that we talked about earlier for Mr. Weber, if you would stay behind and sign off on that. Thank you. And with that, I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Skipsey. Councillor Vander Valk, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Oh, and just online?
Yeah?
Oh, no, never mind.